today to our How to Build Your Personal Strength as a Business Partner webinar that's being facilitated by HR Recruit, Marion, Hewitt and Deborah Wilkes. My name's Jo Thompson and I'm a consultant for HR Recruit. I'm joined today by Marion and Deborah, who will introduce themselves shortly. Keeping to their theme of reaching in to our internal resources and reaching out to increase impact, in this webinar, we will consider how, as business partners, we can do this using our personal strengths. If you've got any burning questions or comments during the session, then please put them into the chat box facility and we will cover them as we go along. I'm now going to hand you over to Marion and Deborah, who will introduce themselves and start the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're looking forward to this session. And so Deborah and I think we met actually over LinkedIn a few years ago, and we realised that we actually both really had a passion for supporting the HR profession, but actually kind of the approach and where we were coming from in that really complemented each other. My background is a lot of years in HR, different roles, different sectors, and then in more recent years developed a real interest around the well-being and particularly that positive psychology element. So actually how we can enable ourselves to be in the best place to be our best and perform our best, as well as our overall levels of happiness and well-being. And that very much aligns with how we can reach in and to those resources to in turn perform better. So Deborah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so likewise, my background's in HR, and so Marion and I both know that actually it can be quite a tough job sometimes. I worked my way up from an admin role and then later got my CIPD or IPM as it was in those days, and ended up as head of HR for Europe in the IT sector and then in a pharma company. And then went into leadership development, but about 25 years ago, actually. Then a few years ago, reconnected with my HR roots and kind of now combine the two. So we want to, it's going to be a participative session. So do get your phones ready. We're going to ask you this question. So you've got the Menti details at the top there. Go into menti.com, use that code. We're going to do a word cloud here. I'm going to hide the responses for now so that, so that we can, you're not going to steer each other in any direction. So you can put in as many words as you like. Keep your responses coming in. So do get your Menti going because we're going to use it several times during the session. Okay, let's see what we've got coming up.
Oh, a lot more coming in. Excellent.
It's great, isn't it?
Oh, I'm liking this. There's some good words coming up here. It's interesting to see where there's similarities and how actually the words vary from session to session. But I think we're quite glad. Look at that one, strategic coming through as the
yes,
as the top one, and collaborations in there. I seem to remember the last one we did, collaboration came through as the top word. So we've got, yeah, as you'll see, the larger the font, the more responses people are having. So just give it a few more seconds.
There's a great number of responses. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Some of the words are sort of similar things, but just articulated slightly differently. Looking at, working together, we've got working together, we've got collaborative, we've got relationship building, so partnership. So a lot of themes But yeah, strategic has clearly come through as the top one, which is a really good place to be starting, because in many ways that's kind of what we are wanting to be focusing on today, is actually how can we be spending our time in that part of our role, because we know that life happens, and whilst we might want to be doing that part, and actually that is what we associate with the partnering role, in day-to-day life it's not always quite that simple. Now, where we come from, and this was a throwaway comment when Deborah and I were talking quite early on, I think it was Deborah that sort of said it's kind of that reach in and reach out, which is where we've sort of stuck with as the model that we use. So it's how we reach in, and today we're talking about the strengths, so how we have an awareness of our personal strengths and how we can optimize their level of use for confidence. And then when we have those internal resources, how we reach out to increase our impact and get our true value across to stakeholders so we can move forward together. So collectively, and an outcome of that, we have greater strength and impact in our role. So when we are reaching in, we have different resources, but actually what we are looking at today are our strengths. And if I was to ask you to name your top 3 strengths, I'd be surprised if the majority of you actually named them accurately. As we will talk about, strengths are not necessarily the things we're good at. We can learn to be good at things, but that's not the same as our natural strengths. And actually only 1/3 of people could name their strengths. Therefore, 2 out of 3 of us are not actually making the most of them. And 97% of 18 to 19-year-olds, when they were asked, didn't get their top strength right. So there are profiles and things we can use to help us recognize our strengths. And I also suspect if I was to ask you that question, you know, those interview questions, unfortunately we don't use them quite the same way now, you know, can you name your top strengths, was always much harder than the, you know, if I was to ask you your weaknesses, would you be able to tell me, list me those quite quickly? Whereas today we want to think about strengths. Now, how do we define a strength? What do we actually mean by it? So we got a couple of quotes here, and they're quite a few years apart, but way back Aristotle's time, he was talking about, to attain a good life, we strain every nerve to live in accordance with the best thing in us, the internal strengths. And if we move to a more recent and perhaps an academic definition of it, a strength is a pre-existing capacity for a particular way of behaving, thinking, or feeling that is authentic and energizing for the user and enables optimal performance, development, and function. So if you pick up from that, that it's about that inside us and enables that optimal performance, which is what we want. So just to clarify, the strengths are not just the things that we become good at. They are about when we have the energy. They are the things that give us a buzz. And there's lots of different models. But actually what we also know is that when we are using a strengths approach, there are a lot of benefits, because it's focusing on what is right, what is strong actually inside us. And everybody has their own unique set of strengths, and you know, we deserve respect and acknowledgement from those. There's no better strengths than others. There are some strengths that are more helpful in some situations than others, but actually no strength overall is better. So when we're looking at models of strengths, a strength will be, sorry, I'll flip back to the first one before for now, thank you. When we're looking at strengths, they would generally be valued in their own right. They would stand in different situations across a range of behaviours, thoughts and feelings. And the thing about a strength is one person having it doesn't lessen somebody else. So if I am strong in one character, in one strength, it doesn't diminish or reduce somebody else, if that makes sense. But what do we actually understand as, or and have we learnt as benefits of strength? And if I look through that list, I would personally quite willingly have more of most of those, or less of them, depending on the language of it. We know that people who are drawing on their strengths have an overall level of happiness that is higher, you know, and ultimately whatever words we use around well-being, positivity, actually being happy is what most of us will be striving for as the main thing we want in life. We are likely to have general greater satisfaction in life, more likely to be flourishing. And if we talk about my particular area of interest is that, as I mentioned at the beginning, the positive psychology, which is about how we can use our mind to actually flourish and thrive. So if we're using strengths, we are working on a more positive model for that. Our overall well-being is better. Higher levels of energy, definitely doing more of that, and less stress. So whether actually arguably it's we have less stress, or actually we've just got better resources to manage it. And if we're drawing on strengths and we're energized, we're much more likely to achieve our goals and perform better at work and be more engaged in it, because of that too. We're drawing on things that are good within us, and then more effective at growing ourselves. So drawing on our strengths is the best way we can make a big difference. So why is this relevant today? Deborah and I have done a series of webinars picking up on different things, all about different routes to how, as HR professionals, can we have better impact in the organisation. We're in the profession because we believe in it, and we know it can have makes a positive difference to employees and organisations. So why are strengths relevant to the part of business partnering? How does it contribute to you being able to be more strategic, more collaborative, if we think of the words we had on that word cloud at the beginning? Why it's relevant is because research is suggesting that perhaps we are not as effective at drawing on our strengths as we might be. And there was some research, and it was actually Indeed that did it, or a survey, and 4 out of 5 HR professionals reported experiencing imposter syndrome, so that fear of being found out. And we're actually doing a webinar on that in spring sometime, aren't we, Jane? And then my own research found that female HR professionals were extremely self-critical. They were not very good at talking to themselves kindly. There was an awful lot of self-judgment and self-criticism. And we know that was then linked to self-doubt, low levels of confidence. They were putting others first to the detriment of themselves, and they were striving for better, which is great at one level, but it's when it comes from the place of not feeling they're good enough that it becomes less helpful. So if we are recognising and drawing on our strengths, we can help address some of those. And CIPD, in their people profession survey, which they do annually, I haven't seen it yet, it usually comes out a bit earlier than this, but they found that 30% reported that work had a negative impact on their physical and mental health. And obviously, if we are not feeling as well in our overall health, it will impact how we can show up at work. And the previous slide showed that if we have got a strengths approach, then it has a beneficial impact on our overall well-being and how we manage stress. So using our strengths is very relevant to business partnering. But what is a strength? How do we identify what we mean by a strength? And there are different elements of it. So central to that is it's something that is pre-existing. It is in us. The pathways in our brain are ready to use. Maybe we develop them as children, but they're there. So we know there are elements of both biological and psychological makeup that will predispose us to a particular strength. So it's there in us in terms of how we think, feel, and behave. When we are using our strength, it feels authentic, it feels comfortable, it feels we're being the real me, and it aligns with things that are important to us. And they're also used across multiple areas of life. You know, strength isn't only a strength in one area of our life. We might use it differently in a different area, but we can use it across all areas of our lives, and it feels natural and true to who we are. Crucially, it's energizing. It means we have more energy available to us. You know, that increased sense of vitality, engagement, zest for life. Most of us probably want more of that most of the time. So how that helps. And then when we have those together and we're drawing on our strengths, it will help us to move more towards that state of flourishing. So I often use a graph quite a lot, or a diagram quite a lot, that talks about at the bottom of the continuum or the barrow, we have poor health, whether that's physical, mental or social. If we move to a place of well-being, we have a balance. The model I use a lot talks about well-being as a balance between the challenges we face and the resources we have available. But if we move further up, we then move to that flourishing point. So perhaps think about, can you think of a time when actually you've experienced that? What particularly, were you doing? What were you drawing on? And see if that can help you. So today we're only able to go through things as a very brief overview, but just think about it, because remember, it's not just something, there might be things that we're very competent at, but it's not necessarily energizing. So it's not a strength. So how we can increase that, and also that authenticity. We know there's lots of other benefits of authenticity, and if you are familiar with the work of Brené Brown, she does a lot of things around the importance of authenticity. And then if we look at what does that continuum of strengths, so we can use strengths at different levels. So if we are underusing them or not drawing on them, perhaps we haven't recognized them. If we haven't been using them, they might not immediately feel particularly authentic because we're not practiced with using them. We haven't recognized our ability. And if we are underusing them, we're actually missing out on an opportunity to be effective. It will go rusty if we're not using it. And if we are overusing our strengths, perhaps it was appropriate in one context, but the situation's changed and it doesn't become so appropriate. Or, we use it differently. If we look at honesty, for example, honesty, if somebody was to, in one situation, being, very honest and almost blunt is absolutely fine. In another situation, it would be less helpful. So how do we use it? If somebody was to ask for constructive feedback after they've done something, and I could give that honestly and openly. But if somebody was to ask me how I thought they looked before they went on stage to do a presentation, and I didn't like their outfit, and I was very honest, it probably wouldn't be a very helpful use of the strength. So thinking about what does overuse look like? And then optimal use is about how do we use the right strength in the right amount, in the right way, at the right time. So perhaps think about it as a volume control. How do we find that golden mean, the optimal level? And again, situationally, the context will impact it, the strength that we're drawing on will affect it. And sometimes it can be quite hard. One of the exercises we do in the workshop is actually really help us to articulate what does underuse, optimal use and overuse of a particular strength look like. And it can take a bit of work to think about that. Ultimately, when we are using our strength, it is about strength is performance plus energy, which obviously is both of those will be good. We want to be able to perform well. We want to be able to do all the things that we put on that word cloud at the beginning. And we want to feel energized while we're doing it. We don't want to feel that we might be achieving, but it's taking every ounce of our energy in doing so. So there's not a lot of downsides in that, really. If we recognize what our strengths are, if we identify them, if we can recognize and work out what does optimal use look like in different situations, the outcome will be better performance and more energy to do that. But ultimately, if we are not using our strengths,
am I a bit early?
That's fine. What we would like us to think about now, I mean, we haven't, there's not the time, we haven't been able to go through and help you actually really work out what your strengths are. But what I would like you to think about is, at the moment, I suppose, firstly, could you accurately say what your strengths are? And do you optimize your strengths and enjoy doing so? So again, some of you already, if you look at, use the code, look at the question that will come up. Do you think you are able to do that? I optimize my strengths and enjoy doing so. How are we doing? Got some few coming through.
So as you say, this is very situational, isn't it? Sometimes you might think, well, yeah, it's all very well talking about this, but how can I, if I'm in a situation that actually is really uncomfortable, how can I use my strengths?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
And there's exercises that are useful to things like, interventions that we use in positive psychology. That's things like encouraging us to actively use our strengths in a new way, because often the reason people are not good at, or often not good at, recognizing strengths is because if it comes easy to us, we don't notice it in quite the same way. We might not recognize that other people won't view things. So, if honesty comes as the example, as the top strength for somebody. So if I do my strengths profiles, regardless of which tool, they come out with love of learning as the top one, and then sort of fairness and honesty are the ones beneath that. But actually, because we have a strength that feels natural to us, unless we actually stop and think about it, we might not recognize that other people won't view it in the same way. So whilst fairness is vitally important to me, and that will be how I approach things, I might not notice that as how I approach things because it comes natural, whereas because somebody else who doesn't have that as the same strength, that might not be a priority for them in terms of how they're addressing something. So how do I use fairness as a strength in sorting out and helping move forward a situation? So we're pretty middle of the 5. It's not as we're not missing out on as much as we might do. So 5 words, so we're just over half. But it does show that there is potentially a lot of capacity that you're not accessing. How much performance and energy are we missing out on by not drawing on our strengths? Because what we ultimately know is that a strength without application, if we're not drawing on it, is nothing more than untapped potential, effectively. So we definitely want to draw on that, recognize our strengths, work out what optimal use is, see how we would flex it in different situations. If I've got this problem in front of me, this challenge I need to overcome, if I was to, I mean, sometimes it's as simple, put this hat on, this is the strength I know I have. If I energize myself with this strength and knowing I have this, what superpower, if you like, does it give me to help me resolve this situation? And sometimes we might not think it's particularly relevant, but there's usually a way that we can recognize that we can draw on it to help us solve a situation. So then once we have dealt with all of that, we've energized ourselves, then how do we reach out? Which obviously then leads on to Deborah, to your part, in terms of what do we then do to reach out to increase our impact?
So of course, what we're doing in this session is we're recognizing that the way we feel internally about ourselves and about our work really impacts our performance and our enjoyment. And so it's good to bring these two threads together Because in both of them, what we're doing is looking at things much more consciously. So consciously thinking about how we're using our strengths, and also consciously thinking about how we manage relationships. So here we've got Sophie. She's having a good day. Something nice has just happened. There she is at her desk. So let's imagine now Sophie is operating successfully as a business partner. What does it look like, sound like, and feel like? So again, we'd like your participation. And I'll hide responses just to start with. And hopefully this is you on a good day. What does it look like, sound like, and feel like when it's going well?
What have we got coming through on this one?
Well informed, yes. Satisfied, productive, of value. Thanked, that's a good one. Added value,
I like
save money. Yeah, we don't get a lot of that in HR, do we?
Added value.
Looks in control, sounds confident, feels
Trusted
like a
advisor. Like that one too.
Yeah. Delivering something tangible, reached out to for advice. Two-way conversations, that's nice. Strategic, risk averse, laughing, having a positive impact. Rewarding, smooth, confident. A go-to person, being part of the conversation. People are on board.
The being part of the conversation is often one of the biggest challenges, isn't it?
Exactly.
In establishing as a partner. Yeah.
So this is great for kind of a segue into our next session, and these outputs will be
well, look at that one. Stress-free, relaxed, and up to date. That feels a bit aspirational. So we'll go.
Because the thing is, when you think about your strengths, a lot of us went into HR because we like people, and that really is a strength in HR, because people need to be able to talk to you when you're in HR. So you need that empathetic side. And yet now the pressure is also on us to do things like meet our KPIs. We have to be partners in the business. And sometimes that can feel uncomfortable. So that's great. Thank you so much for your input. So we know that not all days are good, and we're going to come back to that. But why does being a strong HRBP matter? And I'm going to go through some research fairly quickly just to make the point. And when you get the slides, all the links to these reports are there. So except for this one, because it is mine. So when you think about the power of business partnering, this is it for me, that you've got your professional specialist expertise. So in HR, you know what you offer, you know how to get the best out of people, you understand whether you're a generalist or a specialist, you've got fabulous expertise to offer. But then your partners in the business, they understand the organization, they understand the customer, they know what happens at the front line to do things like increase sales. So their brain is in a different place. But if you could really get those brains together and learn from each other, then you can have these wonderful light bulb moments where you sort of think to yourselves and say to each other, you know, that's great. Well, now I know more about your job, I realize that actually we could do this. And you get those great ideas coming out. But to get to that point, you've really got to build trust in the relationship. So here's one of the reports. I love this one because Gartner have actually quantified the impact of effective business partnering. So it can increase employee performance by 22% and profitability by 9%. And in the report, they explain how they calculated that. But you'll see over here, they're talking about strategically effective HRBPs. So the kind of HRBP that's really getting themselves stuck into senior level conversations. And going back to how you feel internally, that might feel quite hard. Also from Gartner, they're saying when we look at how the HR operating model is moving forward, it's still basically the three-legged model. They're now calling it Ulrich Plus. Ulrich would probably say, well, this is what I always meant. But the strategic talent leaders doing partnering at a strategic level. So they're a lot of this is about the level of your conversations. Who are you spending your time talking to? Because if your time is being stolen, bit of a provocative term, but think about it, by employees and even line leaders, so that you don't have time to talk to more senior leaders, then that gets in the way of your operating more strategically. And we've got the CIPD definitions where they're saying understanding the business and achieving this through meaningful relationships. You get that understanding. It's like a double whammy, isn't it? A win-win, because the better you get to know your stakeholders, the more comfortable you feel with them, and also the more you learn about the business. So it's quite hard to move up a level in HR. And so again, this is on Menti. Would you please put your dot on where you spend most of your time? So again, this is to challenge you about thinking about what actually happens now, because then you can inspire yourself to move up a level. I'm not surprised the first one's in blue. We've got some in green. That's great.
Oh, we've got one in orange.
That's brilliant. You should run the next webinar, whoever has put that, and tell us how you did it. But of course, it doesn't always go with level, because you can be a CHRO and still have to clear up a mess that one of your colleagues has managed badly.
And
so you've got a really good spread.
Size of the organisation and structure and everything also impacts it, we realise.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a really good spread here. And of course, the further you are down the back of the arrow, the more frustrating it is likely to be, because I used to think to myself, I could add far more value if my time wasn't taken up doing all these things that don't really add value to the organisation. But pushing ourselves forward is quite demanding, emotionally, as we've been talking about. We have to build our courage. We have to build our credibility. We have to be more influential. So thank you for that. Do keep putting them in if they haven't appeared yet, because the next question is, if you were able to move up a level, just imagine it. What would that do for you and your organization? Because this is about business impact. It's not just about a nice to have. It's saying, if I were able to operate more strategically, wow, what could I do? So what comes into your mind? You can inspire each other with your answers here. Space to drive. Now that's a great one, isn't it? Because that is business minded. Because quite often when we're raising our game in business partnering, we have to actually explain it to our stakeholders. We have to say, if I were able to leave you with more, if I were to coach you in how to deal with some of these difficult issues yourself, then I'd have more space to help you to drive results, recruit a team.
I'm looking at that one, find solutions at source level to prevent the day-to-day issues occurring. I mean, that's
Yes.
about being ahead of the curve, isn't it? The fact
Yeah.
we spend so much time just dealing with problems rather than, the bigger actions to stop them or reduce them.
Absolutely. Drive better leadership performance. That's a great one, because we know all those conversations that we have from day to day are really important. Because if we can drive better leadership performance, that adds so much value. It's quite difficult to quantify that.
Mm-hmm.
So as Marion mentioned, we've put together a workshop where we can go into these things in more depth and help you to build your own personal strategies. And we've got a great offer on that we're going to share with you at the end. And in the follow-up email. So look out for that, because what you're saying here is the benefits of achieving this are really, really significant, showing and demonstrating our value as HR. It takes time to do that, doesn't it? But it has benefit for everyone. So hold these in your mind to, we've got loads more. Brilliant. Better use of my time. Improve engagement. We know the evidence that proves the benefit of that. Oh, have a head of HR. Lean processes. Yeah, actually make your processes more effective. Brilliant stuff. So I did a workshop for a team of business partners a while ago, and these were the kinds of things that they said, which just put into different words what you just said. Really, it's rewarding when you are the conduit between HR and the business, when you're at the table, when you're involved in strategic work, when you hear about things first and so on, rather than firefighting. You're just having to look at your inbox all day, feel like a help desk. That's awful, isn't it? And actually that seems to happen more when you've got centers of excellence and you feel more like a post box than anything else, not delivering what I should. So it can be frustrating. And in our survey, if you'd like to look at it, there's a link to it again in the slides. When we ask people what gets in the way of you moving up to the next level, going back to that arrow, these were the things that they said. The mindset of business leaders came top. Next in the list was resource issues in HR. Proving the value of HR actually takes some work, but we can do it. HR's ability to influence decisions, and the mindset of HR, because there are some people whose bosses actually aren't maybe as forward thinking as you would like, and some HR people find their bosses aren't courageous enough, and equally some bosses find that their HR teams like to stay in their comfort zone. So which is your top theme out of those?
This one's always interesting in terms of, if we really challenge ourselves, what is the
And they're all quite connected in a way. If you could fix proving the value of HR, for example, then you could build a really good case for more resources. You could change the mindset of business leaders. So it looks like you guys agree that the top one is the mindset of business leaders. And that's what we have to change. And it can be quite hard because, of course, sometimes they're just on a different page. The thing that keeps them awake at night is meeting their sales numbers, meeting their production deadlines. And they don't automatically get the connections between that and HR's work, and also how they should treat their people. For us, it's absolutely causal, isn't it? If you engage your people, you treat them well, that will cause better productivity. We have to make it, even though that is absolutely obvious to us, it isn't to a lot of business leaders, and we actually have to explain it. That's like a topic for a whole other webinar, that, isn't it?
Likewise,
so thank you for that. That's
another whole topic that we
yes. And so this is where we come back to your comfort zone, and we got a real link here with what Marion was saying, and do chip in here, Marion, that it's quite hard for us to move out of areas where we do feel more comfortable.
Because if we've got people coming to us with queries that we can resolve, we can help them, which feels good. It's like that immediate reward, and that feels safe, that feels comfortable. Whereas actually some of the bigger things we have to do, the things that actually have that strategic impact, stretch us a lot more. It's much more about moving out of those comfort zones, which is why I often, hopefully in a supportive way, will challenge that previous one in terms of actually there may be more in terms of the mindset of HR than we might initially acknowledge. So yeah, because it explains it. Being comfortable feels safe and comfortable.
Yes.
Actually, sometimes to make a difference, we have to move out of that.
And sometimes we have to say no.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to let you dump this on me, because if I do, then I actually can't add value at a higher level. Whereas if we could talk about how we could handle this differently, then actually I could help you in a different way. And so this is a model that I developed after researching with HR leaders who were creating the business partnering concept, if you like, of getting their business leaders to treat HR as business partners. And we have 2 dimensions here. So these are just 2 things to remember when you are in a conversation with your stakeholders. One is, to what extent am I talking about the business, and to what extent am I directing the conversation towards the business, and to what extent am I talking about the present and not the future? Because in the respond box, then that's what it's easy for us to do most of the time. Somebody comes in, it's a sort of a same old problem, so we just fix the problem, and actually they are very happy with that. So we develop a practical solution. You might say, oh yeah, well, we've got to follow this policy, manage stakeholders, but it's transactional, not transformational. If we stay in that box, we're not changing anything. So if we direct the conversation more towards the business, then we're going to be learning all the time, and we're more likely to develop a solution that is more appropriate for the business, more business friendly, if you like, more agile. Anticipate is kind of more natural for us because we're used to looking at HR trends and that kind of thing, but we also need to look into business trends, future strategy of the business. I got to confess, when I was in my HR role, I really wasn't tied into the business planning cycle. Now there's a confession. So if you're somebody with the same confession, it's something you can actually fix quite easily. Get ahead of the business planning cycle. If I know that my stakeholders are planning their budgets in, I don't know, January, then I need to be talking to them right now about what that means in people terms. Because then if you're doing both of those things, you're talking about the future and you're talking about the business, you will be able to collaborate, come up with new ideas. You'll actually have the conversation about how is this adding value to the business, and come up with ideas together. But you can't do that if your beliefs aren't in the right place. So this again is quite challenging. And this cycle is about how our beliefs drive our behaviors. If I believe that I'm just there to solve problems, then I'll do a good job solving a problem, and it will come through in my behavior. And so others will notice that, oh yeah, she's really good at solving problems, which reinforces their behavior towards us, and it reinforces our beliefs about ourselves. Whereas if we have the belief that we add value to the business, then that comes through in our behavior. If we get a bit more savvy with the numbers and we get them into our conversations, then that comes through in our beliefs about ourselves. We try it once or twice and we think, oh, that felt good, I'm going to do that a bit more. We do it more confidently. It comes across in our behavior, and our stakeholders think, well, you know what, she really understands the business, and they say that to other people, and then we get the feedback and it reinforces that. So we want to have this reinforcing of an upward positive cycle, because if we don't believe it, then we can't be it. So we do need to challenge our beliefs. And this is where we get the links between what I've been saying and what Marion's been saying. Underneath, so I guess one key takeout for today is to become as conscious as possible of what's going on beneath the waterline in order to understand the impact that that's having above the waterline, so that we can manage that. So here we've got the details of our workshop. We'd love your questions. What we'd like to do now is to really psych you up. So very positive question before we do we've got one more question after this. Do put your questions in the chat. Imagine a situation where you felt able and eager to work to your strengths in your role. What great things would you dream of doing? It's pushing you that little bit further than the last question.
I don't know if any other things have come up in the other chat. I don't know, in a general chat, can't pick it up.
Yes, I can't see the chat.
There's nothing come through in the chat.
Oh, that's why then.
That's why we can't see it. Oh, there's good ones here. So there you go. I hope you're write these down as well for you, because they can be a good motivator to what are we striving towards. Give the time and resources to tackle mental health and well-being. Yes, and actually that is a strategic business priority, because the outcome of all of that are all the things we're trying to address.
Build confidences between departments. That's interesting. Oh, the chat is switched off.
Oh, I didn't realise that. I'm so sorry. I didn't know.
That's all right. We can put that right now and get your questions.
Minute questions.
Bear with me.
Thought it was quiet.
Be a key player, identifying problems. These are brilliant. Work on a strategic HR plan. Wouldn't that be brilliant? And of course, you can do all those things. And if that's working to your strengths, because isn't it strange how sometimes we leave our strengths outside the room? Like we go into a meeting and we think, hey, I've got to be a certain way, and therefore we leave our personality outside the meeting, when actually that's the thing that we know is our strength, and we're more influential when we let that come through. Brilliant. You'll get these in the slides. Change institutional mindset. Brilliant things. So this is our the research that we did in my company on what is it that enables business partnering. We've got our enablers, and Marion's got her program as well. We'd love to keep in touch with you all, so do link in. So this is the final question, so do give us your input as well as think about your questions. What has had impact on your thinking today? So a chance for a bit of reflection.
We do know we've had to go through a lot of things at a real whistle stop. We've had to be very restrained to try and keep within the time. But
We've got a great question here for you, Marion. I wanted to ask why knowledge wasn't represented in the strengths triangle as a foundation for a strength.
Because knowledge is something we can learn in terms of like a competence, we can develop, we can learn something, whereas a strength is something that is intrinsic in us. The wiring in our brain is effectively there. So it's more about how you would draw on your strength to build your knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Caroline's just raised a hand. Do you want to put something in the chat box? Now it's working.
Oh, the difference between transformational and transactional, that is a really good question. So
quite a big question as well.
Yes. However, the simple answer is whether or not something changes as a result of what you do. So if let's use a really straightforward example that you'll all really totally get. One of your line managers comes into a meeting with the same old problem, and you say, right, you know, what you need to do is this, and off they go and do it. So that's transactional. Nothing really changes. However, if you're thinking to yourself, well, you know what, this is the third time this month that this guy's come in with the same challenge, a transformational response would be for you to manage that conversation in such a way that maybe you coach them into realizing that there's something quite fundamental going on, maybe in their management behavior, that they could change and therefore stop this situation happening again. So it's where something actually changes as a result. So you don't need to think of it as something, you know, you change something from blue to green, but it is something that, because if you've achieved that with that manager, that can transform their leadership. Giving somebody feedback, taking the tough call and going out of your comfort zone to give a leader feedback, that's the kind of thing that can be transformational. And it needs to be done very carefully.
Just looking at some of the responses on the impact of thinking. I'm just mindful we've got to wrap up, but yeah, one of them, I matter of my well-being and development matters to me to impact upon my organisation. I wanted to pick that one up because we know, both Deborah and I know from our work, that actually one thing that an awful lot of people in HR struggle with is actually putting themselves first, putting their development first, and actually recognising to invest in ourselves actually enables us to do all the things that we want to do. You know, how often do you have the plan for the organisation and then HR is kind of tagged on a bit as an afterthought? We don't treat ourselves with the same level of care and attention as we do the rest of the employees. So it is really important that we recognise that and invest in ourselves to then turn up and make the change we want to.
You were going to say then, be the change we want to see, weren't you?
Well, something like that, yes. So
yes.
I try to avoid some of the cliches, but yes.
Yeah, but that's so true, isn't it? You can do it.
Yeah.
You can be it. We tend to think, well, I remember in one HR role, I actually thought I needed to leave my company in order to be this person that I wanted to be in a new organization. And then I went and I left and I did it. And I thought, I could have done that before. I could have changed my behavior. You can change people's perceptions of you. Yeah, this is classic. You know, don't think you're the only person who realizes that they might be leaking some negativity, because it's a hard job and you can stop being dumped on. And we will talk about that on the workshop. Reading, I have written a book. Hope you don't mind me mentioning that. It's called Empowering HR.
Well done. You're not very good at remembering to just talk about that.
Yeah, no, I usually completely forget. Yeah, business partnering is really an important, it's like a whole direction that we're traveling in HR, and we're, in a way, we're all traveling it together. So a network of business partners is a great idea. I don't know if you've got anything like that, Jo.
I'm just thinking we probably need to wrap up looking at the time.
Yes.
Because we know probably most of you in this mad world have got something else booked in for 1:30. But we really hope we've given you plenty of food for thought, saying we can only go through things at a top level. It'd be great if you connected with us on LinkedIn, via email. You can find our websites there. So we have put together a 2.5 hour workshop that goes into strengths in a lot more detail. It's usually £175, but we're doing it as an offer for people on here. So it would, with the code, it will be £100. So that is on the 12th of December. It would be great to see a few more of you, or lots of you, on that. And it just gives us a chance to actually go through some actual activities and give you some specific tools and techniques that you can put into practice in your role. So I guess we better hand back to Jo to wrap up.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Details about that session that Marion and Deborah are running will be in the email as well. So I'll send out some correspondence to everyone that signed up for the event, and I'll put a post on LinkedIn. So if you would like a copy of the slides and or the recording, then please put a comment against the LinkedIn post. We've got no more events that are running this year, but we've already got quite a lot organised for next year. So I'll attach the link into the email if you want to sign up for any of the events that's been arranged for next year. If anyone is recruiting, we've also got accountancy recruit, FD recruit and executive recruit within the group. But finally, I'd just like to say a massive thanks to Marion and Deborah for the time and effort in putting the webinar together, and also to everyone for tuning in. I hope you'll agree that it's been a really great session. So thanks very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.